Hello, it's Christian Olsen coming to you for a third and final time to talk about differentiating in the elementary classroom using the Common Core standards. In my first video, we talked about how to differentiate for math in the elementary classroom. In the second one, we started to dig in how to differentiate using the Common Core standards in language arts. There, we talked about the importance of clustering so that you have groups of readers who are at similar levels. This allows you to ensure that your more advanced readers are getting more and more complex texts to be reading. We also looked at how the scope and sequence of the Common Core will help us in mapping out what we need to be doing for our gifted students. Now, it turns out that the standards from grade to grade are fairly similar. They're being asked to do the same set of skills. The difference being that as you progress through the grades, the level of mastery they want the students to be achieving with the skills increases, meaning that they're being asked to use the skills in more nuanced and refined ways. By looking at the vertical alignment at what your grades are, the grades above you are doing, you have a good roadmap for what you can be asking your advanced readers to be doing. Today, we're going to be looking at how you can apply that in projects in language arts. In any good project for language arts, they're going to have 3 parts to it. First, your kids are going to read something. Second, they're going to make something. They're going to be writing. And lastly, they'll have a chance to share what they were reading and writing about so that they can practice listening and speaking skills. Obviously, this isn't always possible to do every single time, but when we're differentiating, we really want to be aiming to try to get all 3 areas of language arts covered. There are 2 different ways we can do this. The first is by using a divergent project. Basically, your entire class, typical learners and advanced learners included, will be looking at the same text. However, they'll be asked to do different projects, and then everybody can be practicing their speaking and listening skills by sharing. And we're going to be looking at an example from A Teacher's Guide to Using the Common Core State Standards with Gifted and Advanced Learners in English Language Arts. It was published by Prufrock Press just earlier this year. In it, the 3rd grade class was addressing their second language arts standards, which says that they're going to be recounting stories, including fables, folktales, and myths from diverse cultures, that they will determine the central message, lesson, or moral, and explain how it is conveyed through key details in the text. Now, all of your students in this example would be reading The Tortoise and the Hare. You could then be asking questions, some of which will be perfect for the entire class, advanced and typical learners included. They use the example questions of, what characteristics are there for the tortoise and the hare? And they ask that students create a comparison chart looking at the adjectives Aesop used to describe the 2 characters. Another example question would be, what idea do you take from the fable about what qualities matter in life? What evidence is there in the text to support this question? One of the ways you can differentiate, though, is to also include questions for your more advanced learners. The one they used here was asking their gifted learners, how effective was the fable in getting its moral across to you? Which is a wonderful way to include those higher level thinking skills. Now they're evaluating the effectiveness of the story. Part 2 is where you see the differentiating really happening, though. Your typical learner will be given one project. In this example lesson, the typical learner was going to be illustrating a scene from the story and titling their illustration. They then would have to defend why they chose the scene they did and why they chose the title they did. By contrast, the gifted students were asked to write their own fable using one that the similar theme or moral. They then too had a chance to illustrate it and would have to share why they chose to write the story that they did. In the end, as I've said, both student groups are getting a chance to share and practice those speaking and listening skills. The other way you can be differentiating with these projects is a little more complicated. It's called converging projects. Basically, your students will be reading different texts, and your gifted students might have additional projects to do before coming and doing this project the entire class is doing. And it will once again end with everyone getting a chance to practice those speaking and listening skills. This one is an example for a 5th grade class. They're also addressing that 2nd standard, which if you'll remember is very similar. Here they're reading a story, drama, or poem and looking at what the central theme is by examining how the characters are responding to the story and how the narrator is responding. In it, they say that the typical learner task is to prepare a set of shields that depict important symbols for 3 gods or goddesses from one ancient civilization about which the students will read online. The students would then need to create a rationale for choosing the symbols they have selected, and they need to share what one word they would use to describe the deity and why. For your gifted students, they're going to be reading something a little harder. They're going to be looking at Bulfinch's mythology and reading about both Hindu gods and about Greek god and goddesses. So right away, you have more texts that they're examining. Then they have more complex questions that they're going to be answering. In this example, some of the questions included what challenges did each set of gods and goddesses face, and they asked that the students summarize their understanding of the connections between Hindu and Greek mythology as seen through the depictions of their deities. They also gave their gifted students an extra project, asking them to do a 2 to 3 page research paper describing the similarities and differences of the deities as they were depicted in myth. Only after they completed the research project did they get the same project that the typical learners had, which was, once again, to make a shield with important symbols for 3 gods or goddesses from one of the ancient civilizations that they read about. In this case, Greek or Hindu mythology. They also had to create a rationale for why they chose the symbols, and they had to pick one word to describe their deity and share why. So, your gifted students were reading different texts, they had additional projects, but in the end, they still did the same thing that the typical learner did. But because they took a different path to get to that final project, their understanding should be much more nuanced and layered than your typical learner. It's a chance to provide your gifted students the challenges they need. If you're interested in learning how to find more ways to create divergent and converging projects, please email me at christianolson@park6.org. We can get together in person or over the phone, be sharing different ideas. If you want, I could be co-teaching with you. Or if all you need is a few extra resources, such as the book that we talked about, please feel free to contact me for that too. Good luck differentiating in the elementary classroom, and I'll see you later. Bye!